And of course, our permanent representation, Slovenian permanent representation to the European Union is very, very busy. Of course, also Sergei is very busy in this area because a lot of things are going on. And Slovenia, a small country, has to be organized very well to really run everything smoothly. And I'm sure this will be also the case during this presidency, as well as it was the case of the previous one. I welcome you all. Maybe just quickly the rules. I suggest you pose the questions already during the speeches. You can just write them down. I will try to kind of canalize them to our speakers. And of course, later on we'll have also questions and discussion, obviously also at the end, or even maybe during or actually after each speaker finishes. What should I say else? I mean, we have two parts, as said, education, youth, and sport. But obviously, we'll talk about especially higher education in connection to research and science, and of course, second part, which will really focus on research, science, and innovations. We are organizing this together in trio. Also, this is kind of trio, which is permanent representation of Slovenia to the European Union, Unilion, Unilion, whatever you want. We have here also General Secretary of Unilion, Mr. Dr. Alexandru Marshi-Vasil. Hello, Alex, great to see you. I will pass the word to you to say a few words about maybe Unilion and also, about maybe this event. And of course, then we will kick off. Alex, the floor is yours. The short floor is yours.
Yes, thank you, Draško. Yes, I will be short because the important topics are to follow. Thank you very much for organizing this, Draško. And let me start by thanking very much to the distinguished colleagues from the Slovenian permanent representations for their availability to have this discussion. I must say that it's not the first discussion that we have with colleagues from the Slovenian permanent representations. They were so kind to participate to another discussion that we had some 6 months ago in the context of the trio, so with the 3 presidencies. So very much appreciated your availability to continue that dialogue, and now to take it to the next step into more concrete maybe elements of political relevance. So great words of thanks. Thanks also to the colleagues that have been supporting and helped in organizing this discussion. A few words about Unilion. As Draško was saying, I have the great pleasure of being the chair of the Unilion network, which is an informal network of the representation offices of universities in Brussels. And this network is working as a hub for relevant political and technical information related to education, research, and innovation. We work together, all these representation offices, to help each other in better shaping and better understanding the EU policies, and to get the relevant information ready for our institutions to act accordingly and to be in sync with what is decided at the political level. We invest a lot of time and effort in creating opportunities for collaboration and cooperation between our universities, but also in collaboration and cooperation opportunities with other stakeholders. Just in a few words, we are about 150 universities represented in this network through the work of 50 offices, because some offices are representing more than one university. And we have an internal structure that is based on a series of working groups that are taking up the main elements of interest for the implementation of the research and innovation, education, research and innovation policy. We're working on issues like the implementation of the Horizon Europe. We're working on synergies. We're working on excellence, so the implementation of the excellence pillar. We're working on international cooperation issues, and so on and so forth. So with these words, I think I gave you a general overview of what UniLion is. We're just for those that are not involved or have not been in touch with UniLion up to now, just to say that we are open for any kind of dialogue on the relevant topics, and we're willing to engage in any kind of discussions that are relevant to our members and to the stakeholders in the sector. Now, to this meeting, I think it comes to a this meeting is organized at the perfect timing, just after some very important political decisions on research and innovation have been finalized, and we are stepping now into the process of putting in place the mechanisms and the elements for the implementation of these decisions. So I think the work and the contribution of the Slovenian presidency in this context will be huge and extremely important for the success of the entire research and innovation policy for the next year. So from that point of view, I think it's very well awaited in a way your thoughts on these political decisions and how they will be put in place, and I'm really looking forward to this exchange.
Thank you, Alex, a lot, Chair of UniLion. Okay, I start with kickoff. It's 13 minutes past 10. We have 80 participants out of 100, almost 120 registered. It's always 1/3 somehow not joining. It's quite a formula already, but let's don't lose more time. And I invite Mr. Sergej Možina, Counselor for Research of Permanent Representation of the Republic of Slovenia to the European Union. Sergej, please, the floor is yours. You have a little bit longer floor than Alex, of course, as a main speaker.
Thank you, but actually, Alex, I would like to thank you for framing the context of our presidency so well. I think you really hit the nail on the head with putting us in the time continuum in which we are and what our role is. Indeed, it's focusing now on the rollout and implementation of the new paradigm for European research area. But first of all, I'd like to thank you, Draško, and your team at the Slovenian Business and Research Association for organizing this opportunity for us to have a dialogue with universities, with the stakeholders. This is for us very important, and we really appreciate this opportunity, and I hope that we will have more opportunities like this also still in the future. I will try to share a presentation. I was asked to prepare a presentation, so it would be a bit easier for you to follow the presentation.
Yes, we can see it. It's okay.
Okay,
yeah.
Now I have to minimize the chat and the other windows. Otherwise, I'm informed there is a video overlay. But this will mean I will not see if anybody writes anything in the chat. So Draško, or somebody...
Don't worry, I will follow the chat. Yeah, I will follow the chat, don't worry.
You can see the presentation fine, hopefully.
Yeah,
well,
it looks great.
Finally, now we have an official design of the presentation. I was making a similar presentation, also organized by Draško, you and your team for IGLO last week, and we didn't yet have this design of the Slovenian presidency. And finally, now you are able to see it, but not the logo still. So we're trying to keep the momentum and curiosity for our presidency. But as we mature, and this is what I can offer you now, is also that you will be able to receive this presentation, which I could not unfortunately do in my last presentation. So you will receive this via emails. The organizers will distribute this, hopefully.
And it will be on our internet, both presentations from yours and Luka's.
Brilliant. Well, Luka will actually make a more general overview of our priorities, also horizontally, for not just for research and education, but the whole presidency. And I will dig right into the research and innovation part. So we are going bottom up in this case, and not for starting horizontally and then down. Just to introduce myself, thank you already, Draško, for telling everyone I'm a science attaché here in Brussels. My role in the Slovenian presidency will most notably be to chair the research working party in the council, which prepares the work and does the legislative work together with the European Parliament. I'm not alone here. I have a very good team, Gregor Schweiger and Nina Kuhar, who are currently in other meetings, so you can't see them, but we're a very well-oiled team, I must say, and hopefully we'll be able to meet all of them very soon as well. But I'm by background, I'm a political scientist, nevertheless, I would like to borrow a metaphor to explain our presidency. I would like to borrow a metaphor from the engineering. And if I would imagine the whole EU as a machine, an engine that has to run smoothly, obviously, then I have to say that our presidency is only a very small wheel in this machine, and this wheel is replaced every 6 months. It's taken out and another one is put in. So it is a very important wheel, I can say, because maybe we can imagine it as somewhere in the transmission, because the power is transmitted through this wheel to other wheels, but it's still just a wheel. And the engine only functions properly with all the wheels turning. So together with Germany and Portugal, Slovenia forms a little bit bigger part of this engine. Maybe if it's in the transmission, it's the whole transmission box. So it doesn't really matter which gear we are, because you need all gears at a certain point in this transmission. Maybe we are the small, or maybe Germany is the small, or maybe we're the big. Doesn't really matter, because you need all wheels, for example, to drive a car. So what I'm trying to say is that our presidency plans have not been made in a vacuum, but as a part of an 18-month trio presidency program. We've set common goals and common priorities together with Germany and Portugal, and we are all adding our, let's say, flavors to these common priorities. But as a last part of the trio of Germany, Portugal, and Slovenia, our role is to complete the plan, which you can all access. It's public. The trio roadmap is public. But here I come to the second part of our context, because just as our plan, which we started to prepare together with Germany and Portugal 2 years ago, it was starting to look very good, very complete. We knew where we want to go and where we are, and then COVID happened. So we for a certain while we all hoped that it will go away, but it's still here, as we all know. We should have had this meeting in person, which I would much prefer, but hey, here we are. So as a trio, we also had to rethink a little bit our priorities and our plans. And as an upcoming presidency, we still have to prepare for possible delays in the work of the council. We have to have a plan B for physical meeting and events, because things are a bit, we needed some time to adjust to this COVID environment. And if I use the metaphor of an engine runs in an environment, and the COVID is a really big part of this environment at the moment. So if it's like putting an internal combustion engine into an environment with less oxygen or underwater, so it has to be rebuilt a little bit in order to function still. But even though COVID is having really some horrible effects on our societies, it's also not black and white. So we also need to take lessons from it and build back better, as they say. And this will bring me to the third context, which is the recovery. It is our main overarching theme or our German colleagues would maybe call it a zeitgeist of the Slovenian presidency, recovery. This is what really is in the focus. In this regard, COVID really offers some really brilliant lessons for the role of research, knowledge, education, in securing a more sustainable future and better societal resilience. So this is actually what we think that twin transition should all be about. But I'll come back later to this in the presentation. It's very easy to describe the work. I'm going too fast. To the work of our presidency. It's these four dossiers or four clusters of which we'll be working with: partnerships, ERA, international cooperation, and gender equality. The only one which I don't have a slide for is the first one, the partnerships, because this one is really running smoothly. As you know, it's a package of 3 legal acts. And very soon it will maybe be a package of 2 legal acts only, because the work is really running smoothly. The Portuguese presidency is doing a very impressive job, and we are really on a fast track to finalize this legislative process for the partnerships. First for this first one, Euro HPC, then also for all other 9 European partnerships, joint undertakings, and metrology. I can return to this if somebody wants to discuss them more in detail, but there's really no major problems foreseen here. We are guided by mainly 3 things as a presidency, and this is simplification, maximizing impact, so making the co-investments of private and public more relevant to the objectives of the partnerships, and increasing the openness and accountability of partnerships. But in European research area, this is where I will stop a little bit longer, because this is the largest shared trio priority. Why did we pick this as our main drive of the whole trio? Well, basically because when we were starting to prepare our program, we saw a really good opportunity to make European research area more meaningful, a more meaningful concept. I mean, we've mapped and seen that there has been some successes in the past, and we can attribute some of these successes to ERA. Like, for example, European Research Council, the partnerships which I mentioned, the research infrastructures, the mobility. There's been a lot of things which have advanced in Europe in the past decades, but we don't call ERA. But still, we saw that since 2014, when you remember the Commission declared ERA completed, we've lost a little bit the momentum to achieve this idea of what is in the treaty of a common research and innovation space, where you have permeability of borders, more transnational collaboration, interoperable systems, more coordination among member states and the Commission. So it's been stalled. But then, where did we see the opportunity? We saw a lot of new context now here in this time window. First one, which is reflected, I think, in the Commission communication on ERA, we saw an increased commitment of the Commission to take more ownership of the ERA and drive it forward. This was very, very encouraging. Then we also saw in talks with other countries that we are ready to realize and admit that our ambitions were quite right and high, but we didn't really deliver them, all of them. And finally, the final context actually came later, which I mentioned already, is COVID. Even though, as I said, it's horrible and we hate it, the COVID really gave science a new role in the society. It gave a new reputation to science in politics. We all remember how the society called upon the science to get us out of this mess that COVID made. And science delivered. Yeah, we delivered vaccines, treatments, drugs. It really delivered. So this role of science is not really so new at all, and science used to have it in the past. But I think in Europe we a little bit put it into the background. We a little bit forgot about this role of science, and I think the slow progress towards reaching the 3% of expenditures actually is quite a good proof. We set this goal in 2002, and what is it now? 20 years later, we're not yet there all together. So this is a proof that we could move faster. We could give the science a more important role, and COVID actually very clearly displayed this importance of science in society. So as a presidency, we thought we really owe science this place which it had in society and needs to have it again. And this is where we draw really our ambitions for the presidency for. So what are these ambitions? Well, one of them is to embed research and innovation in all sectorial policies. This is the first bullet point. So what we think is that science needs to provide evidence for policy making first, so that it begins with scientific evidence when we design policies, all policies. And then second, that also the research and innovation can support the implementation of these policies, namely those policies which are responsible for solving societal challenges, from health, transport, energy, food, all the big challenges we're facing. So the Commission is already, I think, following this mantra or this approach, which you can see in almost all the communications and initiatives coming out of the Commission in the last, let's say, year or year and a half. So what we need to do is actually follow on this also on national level, and this is what ERA is about for us. So this is what we call directionality, namely embedding, placing the research and innovation in the center of all policies, so that these policies themselves, transport, energy, health, demand and finance the research and innovation for achieving their own objectives. But as I always like to make a disclaimer here, what directionality is not about, because there is a lot of misconceptions about this. For us, it's not about imposing any demands on the institutions to deliver any products or services, because this is not the way science works, and we wouldn't have the vaccines if we impose that kind of demands on science. And it's not about constraining really the autonomy of these institutions. So I want to just state this very clearly. For us, it's knowledge creation that is the fundamental value, and it has a value on its own before even being applied. So just this is really important to stress. So that's about directionality. But how do we construct this new political commitment and environment that I mentioned that is a little bit has a room for improvement? Well, we've been working since the German presidency, or even before that, on constructing this. You all will remember how a German presidency established a new paradigm for ERA, a new vision, and this is reflected in the Council conclusions on ERA, and also in the Commission communication, which came at the same time. And now Portugal is focusing on the most important priority, I dare to call it. This is the people. And for us, as the last piece in the puzzle, it remains to build this new governance that answer to these new demands. So you will remember we've had a ministerial conference, the first ERA ministerial conference during the German presidency in Bonn. There we raised also the issue of scientific autonomy. You remember the Bonn Declaration. We've also had a lot of ERA debates already in the Council and outside the Council. And we have, as a trio preparing the presidency program, we've had a lot of discussions with the Commission how we need to, strengthen the ERA and roll it out. But what we've managed to do is said, well, this is not something that should be between the Commission and the trio. We've transferred this work from these discussions to this what we call now the expert group on ERA forum for transition, so that all member states and hopefully more strongly stakeholders are involved in this vision. About ERA governance, just very briefly, what we want really is, as I said, link research and innovation to all policies first. Second, involve the stakeholders better in the governance. Focus more on the delivery, which I said is the biggest shortcoming at the moment, and increase political commitment. So basically what we need to do is bring together all the instruments that we can in pursuing the shared objectives, which we currently do not very good for research, but we do it well for macroeconomic policy, for European semester. The recovery and resilience plans, it also set up a process to do this. But even in research, we have strategic planning, we've got the missions, we've got partnerships, we will have industrial ecosystems, and hopefully we'll have national reforms converging into our common vision. So I told you already how we are doing this. We have begun the work in this expert group of the ERA Forum for Transition, where this Pact for R&I that I've put on screen is being designed. And in this pact, I won't lose your time on it unless you want me to, but basically it will define shared principles, main priorities, and then also, and this is really important, frame our ambitions. I'm talking about targets, and also, even more importantly, the process to meet these targets or these ambitions. This is really essential, this last part, how to go from agreeing on what is our shared objectives to then defining the EU, the national, and the regional level actions. And not just actions. What I mean by actions is investments and reforms to deliver these objectives together. So during our presidency, we want to adopt the Pact for Research and Innovation and define the rest of the governance framework in the Council conclusions. So what I mean by the rest, it's the process for political validation of midterm priorities, if I dare to call them that. This is what in our jargon we currently call ERA policy agenda. And we also need to define the governance modes and possibly structures for coordination of this priority. And most importantly, as I mentioned, to define how stakeholders are involved in this governance. This last one is really important to us. I cannot stress this enough to our presidency. You will see all our events, when I come to that, are being organized as a stakeholder events. If you remember, we've had this ERA ministerial I mentioned in German presidency, but when we are designing our ERA conference, we also looked into designing it the same way to increase, the political commitment, the political buy-in of the ministers. But then we said, well, actually, we should give more priority to stakeholder co-design than to ministerial commitment. We will still try to build that through the other events, which I will come to ministerial meetings, but this will really be about our conference on ERA, will really be about implementation, basically. We will not focus on the concepts and the design of ERA, but more on the implementation so that the conference will feed into the work from 2021 on. So actually it will offer the first opportunity, if I can say that, for the stakeholders to be one step ahead of the policymakers. So this is, I thought that this was really important. Stakeholder involvement is really important for us, but also citizen involvement. At this point, I usually mention the Tree of Science campaign, which we call Plastic Pirates, which we wanted to make it a European campaign, but then COVID happened, so we had to focus on the virus more. But we are still running it with the help of our National Biology Institute and other counterparts in Germany and Portugal. Pupils are being engaged in science in primary schools, and it's a really great campaign. I can introduce it later if somebody wants some details on it. Then other ERA priorities which you see on screen are also research infrastructures. We are in a point in time where endorsement is necessary, political endorsement of the new S3 roadmap. We will also have a research infrastructure conference and S3 days, again, as I said, focused on stakeholder co-design, basically stakeholder involvement. We continue the Portugal priority on researchers and careers. We are organizing a Marie Skłodowska-Curie conference to focus a little bit more on the early stage researchers and reintegration after mobility, because we want to have more mobility, but not more brain drain. We want more mobility turn into brain circulation. This is what our conference will focus on. And this actually brings me to international cooperation, which can be perceived as part of actually ERA, but it's a standalone process, namely for the second bullet point and the third one as well, but namely for the second. But politically, Slovenian presidency or geographically focuses on Western Balkans. And you know, there are some very important steps being made just now. Actually, I think it's next week, 27th. There will be an adoption of a joint declaration on Western Balkans agenda on innovation, research, education, culture, youth, and sport. I hope I didn't forget any area. And we will also organize a Western Balkan Summit in Slovenia in October, and we are exploring some very important research and innovation topics for this summit as well. But it's still too early for me to speak about that. But then we've got the associations to Horizon Europe process. Here, most of the process happens outside the council. So it's mostly in the Commission's court where the ball is, but the council is keeping an eye on it. And if we will have to do anything in the council, we will, as a presidency, do everything to facilitate that this goes very quickly, very smoothly, because this is actually about building ERA for us as well. And finally, what is it today? 18th. I think today the Commission should publish the communication on global approach to research and innovation. I haven't been able to check the internet if that's happened already or the college has adopted it yet. But this is an important initiative that we will organize a response in the council on this initiative. And finally, I think it's my no, it's penultimate slide. The gender priority. I will respond to the questions in the chat. Don't worry, I see it's. I like where the questions are going. If you will want, Draško. So, but just to finish with this presentation, this is the last one. Gender, actually, as I said, it's actually part of the ERA priority, and for us, it's so important, really, we decided to present it as a standalone priority, because it's really important to keep it high in the political agenda. There are some very important research and innovation or technological questions related to gender equality as well. So for us, it's a really important priority. We started already back in December with a trio workshop with the member states in the margins of ERAC committee, where we debated the impact and the opportunities that the gender equality plans might have on this issue and on structuring the research and innovation landscape as well. We will have our first presidency event actually on 8th of July as a final event of the Gender Action Project. Again, it's a bottom-up approach, including the relevant stakeholders into the conference. And finally, it will design, this is the plan, a declaration, which will be presented to the ministers in the Competent Council in September. And also gender equality is part of the Pact, and I think also part of the priorities to begin with. I leave you with this. I wanted to include pictures already in the previous slide so that you can not only look at the text, but at least I put them in the last one, because I hope we will be able to welcome everyone in Slovenia. I summarized the events on this slide that we will be having. I think I've touched upon most of them during my presentation, so I won't dwell on any of these. So that brings me to the end of my presentation, Draško. Now,
thank you, Sergey.
Your hands.
We got actually, yeah. Thanks, Sergey. Again, a very good presentation, very, I would say, systematic, and you displaced everything important really in a very short time. Well, we have actually two questions already. In a way, they're quite similar, and I remember we had some discussion also in some previous meetings of Unilion and even IGLO, but you mentioned, of course, that you're gonna include stakeholders in this ERA discussions and so on. So maybe you could a little bit elaborate on that, please.
Yeah, I'll be very happy to actually. Well, I have to go a little bit into the history. As I said, when we said we wanted to design ERA together. And we explored so many options to do this. First, we said, well, we need, maybe we should have some bilaterals with member states, and then we should organize some events, a series of events where we can discuss different priorities with stakeholders. And then I said, no, that won't be transparent enough. Especially it's not structured. We cannot structure the debate the way that the member states and the Commission like to. So then we said, well, we've got this ERAC committee, which advises, it's part of the advisory structure of ERA at the moment. And it advises both the Commission and the Council. So maybe we can organize this debate within the ERAC and establish an ad hoc working group, which we did to design the ERA paradigm. A lot of you were involved in that a year and a half ago. And then there were a lot of issues. Well, first of all, if you are designing a completely new paradigm, do you use the existing structures to design something new? If currently we are failing to deliver on something, do we turn to the existing structures and say how should we deliver differently? So, and then there was the conflict of interest. Some thought, that maybe placing the old or the current governance structure in the center of designing a new governance structure, well, obviously it's going to first, everyone is just going to ensure the same continuity of the same situation. And then the Commission said, well, we've got this method of a Commission expert group, which is really flexible. And we can, we can accommodate all sorts of arrangements. We're not so bound by constraints. There are some, but not so many. So we should have this. And this was a compromise. So basically we said, okay, let's go for this expert group on ERA, which we called Forum for Transition. It's not a Forum for Transition yet. It's an expert group for the Forum for Transition. And let's have the debate structure there. So then how do you design the pact? Well, first, we all have our national processes of consultations with the stakeholders and with other ministries. And when we start to design the policy, obviously you need some level of maturity of your ideas before you go and ask everyone how things should look like. And what we insisted actually as a trio is that as soon as we have a certain level of maturity, but this would really be soon, not at the end of the process. I think I illustrated this with our approach to the implementation or our design of the ERA conference. We should really engage with the stakeholders. We started to do that I don't remember now when it was, I think it was in March or April, when we had the first meeting with the stakeholders in the ERA Forum for Transition. And I think the debate there, I was really enjoying it, but it was too short. And most of all, what I think was lacking there was a really good overview of what we're trying to achieve with the Pact. We focused on only half of the Pact and not the second half, which I stressed in my presentation today is really important, which is the delivery. So involving the stakeholders in the Forum for Transition, as I see here in the chat, Kurt suggested for opening. Well, yeah, absolutely. Obviously, you cannot have a meeting of, there are 2,000 universities, a bit more than 2,000 universities in Europe, and a very large number of RTOs, and there's other stakeholders. So you cannot have a meeting with 5,000 people sitting at the table. But definitely there needs to be structured debate. So we need a combination of national level consultations and European level consultations. So in the ERA Forum for Transition, another discussion with the stakeholders is planned now at the end of this month, and possibly then also follow up with more if necessary. And in particularly, we have then the Research and Innovation Days, which will be focused, also part of it, on the Pact. And then only actually things start to begin. Because what we need to know is we are not at the end of the process of designing the Pact, we are at the beginning. It's not that we want to decide on everything and then make some kind of a bogus consultation. No. We are at the beginning of a process. The ERA Forum for Transition will not design the Pact. ERA Forum for Transition is only a consultation committee which will advise the Commission how to design the Pact. Then the Commission will take this report. It will take all the inputs we are getting in written form and through the RNI days, through the meetings with stakeholders, and then the Commission will design a proposal for the Pact. So we are currently in a very, very early stage. Then we will have a proposal for the Pact finally. And after that, the proposal goes to the Council, where we again discuss if everything is the way we want it to be. So what I think is the message I'm getting from a lot of stakeholders is that, well, you are again designing something in secrecy, and we don't have enough of a say. I think it's a bit of the coherent picture is missing, which the message I'm trying to send back is we are in a very early stage, and all the inputs are really being read, being considered, and will be taken into account. First, in the work of the forum. Second, in the work of the Commission drafting the Pact. And third, in the work of the Council examining and adopting the Pact. So I think this is, I cannot stress how important for us this is. And these events like this, like today's, actually are another opportunity for us to listen to these inputs.
Sergey, another question is about non-binding nature of the targets. Maybe can you add something to that? It's, probably you see the question, but still.
Yeah, no, well, actually, I don't. Yes, from Alex here.
Yeah, exactly.
The lack of involvement of stakeholders. Yeah, well, the targets. There is, first of all, we have the 3% target. And this is something that the ministers have already, during still the German presidency, or I think it was during the Portuguese, we debated this and we said, yeah, this is a target we need to maintain. And it's a very important target because it drives investments into R&I. Then other targets are, well, the whole approach for the era, and including the governance that we have, is the forum follows function. So when we discuss the targets, we need to know what we want to do. So just to say we need to invest more is one thing, but try convincing the finance ministers with just saying we need to invest more, you need to give me more money. It's always the form, the function that you are pursuing. So I think the targets are easier to be discussed and defined, and their nature defined, when you discuss it in a concrete context. So when we will discuss it in the context of concrete priorities, whether that be having directionality for health, or if that would be open science or research assessment reforms, then it will be easier to discuss, define the objectives and define the targets, which is, first the indicator and then the target of the to reach. Making them more binding, yeah, I agree. Research and innovation is a shared priority. It's not an exclusive European priority. It's a shared priority. So what we can have is target on an EU level, but then we need member states need to buy in. That's why this political commitment that I try to stress is so important. What we are trying to design is a process which we are inspired, I have to admit, by other processes which are in place in Europe. Like I mentioned, European semester, I mentioned the RRF, I can mention also the climate and energy action plans and the process for that. There are some very inspiring processes where member states, they say how they will direct investments, make reforms to deliver on the targets that they agreed on the EU level voluntarily. But we're not starting at the same point. So when we discuss, let's say, 3% goal, some start with 2, some start with 0.5. So obviously, when we define them in a certain point in time, we need to have a flexible approach there. But it is important that we set up a process which would not be as loose as it is at the moment, where we define our national investments in reaching the targets. And this is what this third part of the Pact is crucial, is really important. And on this, I think we should focus our discussions, actually.
Sergey, we are having some questions more. I mean, okay, we are a little bit out of time, but still, I mean, they're interesting questions and it's a very important topic. For example, we have a question here about directionality. and the links with the industrial policy, you know.
Mhm.
And, you know, can you add something to that?
Well, industrial policy is one part of the directionality. What the industrial policy, I think, most notably sets is these industrial ecosystems. But at the end, actually, it's the challenge which defines the problem. And then you need to place the industrial ecosystem, the research innovation ecosystem, and all the actions, investments on all levels into this challenge. So I wouldn't say that either one policy drives another policy, to say the industrial policy drives the research innovation policy, or any other way around. It's the problem. It's like if I go back to the COVID, it was the problem which has driven our coordination, our exchange of information, our linking of research infrastructures, our reorientation of research, which happened voluntarily on the problem, on COVID. So it's not to say, we have industrial goals and we will orient our research investments into that. No. We have objectives, we have problems to solve, and this is directionality for us. And industrial is just one part of this. So we really hope that ERA can offer this framework which brings together the industrial policy and all other policies which are important for solving a challenge.
Okay, great. I suggest we move on. Sergey, are you leading us, or are you staying and listening to your colleague as well? Or
I will stay here if also
you have time,
the
of course.
debate. I'm very happy to continue this debate, of course, if there are more questions on my area.
Okay, great. Thanks again, Sergey, really for very comprehensive presentation and also the answers. I'm inviting now Mr. Luka Živic, his counselor attaché for education, youth and sport, also at Slovenian Permanent Representation to European Union. He will focus obviously on education, especially on higher education, right? Although you had some ideas maybe to tell some other things about education as well, but let's see how things develop. Maybe let's start with the the highest education, so to say, in connection to research, innovations, and so on. And of course, if there are some more questions for Sergey, let's just put them down. I mean, on chat, and we can address them later on. And of course, for Mr. Živic as well. So, Luka, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Draško. Thank you to all organizers and for the invitation to this online event. I'm really happy to participate. Thanks also to Sergey for stepping in. I was told it's unusual or not a good way to start with an apology, but I think I have to and apologize for being late. But as probably Sergey has said, we have our minister in Brussels and many meetings, and the agenda is quite busy.
Well, thanks for coming. In spite of all these facts,
Sure.
Both of you, of course.
Yeah. So yes, I actually wanted to share with all of you also some of our plans and priorities in education as such, because I think there are some additional links, not only regarding what we plan to do in higher education with this link to research, and I hope this will also be of interest to you. So at the very beginning, we obviously also started working and still work very closely with our trio partners, Germany and Portugal. And like in research, we also came up with this trio roadmap where we set for some of the priority areas. I'm not sure if my PowerPoint presentation can be seen, or should I share it?
You should share it, yes.
Okay.
You use the share button there and, just put it on.
Okay.
And we have our Bustian checking it out if everything is okay. Yeah, we can see it now. It's okay.
Okay, let me just...
Yeah.
Okay, very well. So
that's great, yeah.
Indeed, the trio roadmap also serves as as a key orientation to what we plan to do in education, but including higher education and synergies with research. In view of our presidency plans, we came up with this idea to open a discussion on a European vision of knowledge, education, and research for a green and digital future. And in this respect, then 4 overarching priorities will be addressed during our presidency, linked also to the area of research. And this is what you can see on this slide. It concerns inclusive governance, knowledge and skills, green transition, and digital transformation, including AI. So this is kind of the overarching priorities of our ministry, responsible for education, science, sport, and youth as well. So on education and training, we, as you can see, and you already probably very well know, we plan to touch upon synergies between higher education and research, but let me come back to that a bit later in more detail. What we also plan to do is actually put forward a new European agenda for adult learning. And we think this also concerns universities and higher education institutions, because we don't see adult learning only in the context of the labor market, but but in a lifelong perspective. And this will also, the discussions that we will engage in and have will also allow us to build on the results of the Skills Summit, which took place last October in Slovenia, and with many activities that we had with the Commission and OECD. There are some questions that will for sure be addressed on this issue. For example, governance and partnerships, motivation of low-skilled workers and deprivileged groups, quality of adult learning, a role of informal, non-formal, and as well as formal learning, EU-level targets and indicators, and obviously also the inevitable question of sustainable financing. In this respect, maybe I can mention ongoing activities on the Commission side for now on micro-credentials, which can also be seen can be seen in a lifelong perspective, enabling individuals to gain additional knowledge, to upskill, to reskill, and so on. Secondly, we also plan to work on a proposal by the Commission for a Council recommendation on blended learning for high quality and inclusive primary and secondary education. Although this file does not concern university level education, it is also important in view of possible blended learning forms of teaching and learning, which we all are aware that are becoming a reality in all our education and training systems. Before I turn to synergies with research, let me just quickly also mention the issue of the governance of the strategic framework for European cooperation in education and training, which will also be on our agenda. For the time being, it's not yet known if there will be a council document, because this is dependent very much on the discussions that we will have with member states. And also current Portuguese presidency, we will engage in some discussions as well. But the idea is to come up with a suitable governance mechanism of this strategic framework in order to achieve the European education area priorities and European education area as such. And this governance mechanism should be then in place by the end of this year. And now probably the most important and interesting part for you when it comes to education, a topic of great importance for us as well. So this is promoting synergies between higher education and research. In this respect, we do not foresee any special or separate council level document, but we will seek to contribute to the development of a couple of ongoing activities at the EU level, for example, on the transformation agenda of higher education in Europe, or European strategy for universities, as it is called now by the Commission, but also touching upon the issue of synergies with research and plans of the Commission to put forward a roadmap of actions in this respect. So the idea is to open these discussions on this topic and contribute to what will then be later on published by the Commission in regarding these two documents that I mentioned. We plan to have a joint meeting of Directors General for Higher Education and Director General for Research in the ERAC, European Research Area and Innovation Committee, which will take place 30th of September. The idea is to actually already talk about possible avenues of synergies between these two areas. We are currently exploring in more detail the issue of continuing having this kind of joint meetings to ensure that this topic is high on the agenda and relevant for Directors General as well as expert level to discuss. We will also try to put forward an idea of having a joint, more permanent structure to discuss synergies, even in a more, let's say, broad perspective of achieving, on the one hand, European education area, and on the other, renewing European research area. We do believe very much that universities and other types of higher education institutions are actually at the crossroads of these two areas, European education area and European research area. And we think that the issue of governance of these two policy processes can actually be a first possible avenue of joint work between these two areas. There are also some foreseen activities by the Commission in this respect. I don't know exactly current state of play, but there was an idea, and I think it still is, to have joint meetings of the ad hoc group on European universities and a subgroup of the ERA Forum for Transition. I think this is an idea that these representatives have joint meetings, and then later on this could be continued, including with our joint meeting, and later on, hopefully, maybe even with a more permanent structure. All in all, as I mentioned, the whole co-creation process should then result in what the Commission will put forward on the one hand as a communication on the higher education transformation agenda, or however it is called when it comes out, and the roadmap of actions for synergies. Let me also mention that on the 29th of September, day before this joint meeting, we plan to have also a separate meeting of Directors General for Higher Education. We plan to present the results of the public consultations on micro-credentials, which I mentioned at the beginning, as well as the topic of education for environmental sustainability. This is also something which the Commission is actually planning to put forward by the end of this year, as far as we know, in a form of a Council recommendation. Slovenia is also engaged currently in the Hey Innovate project, and this will also be on the agenda of this meeting of Directors General for Higher Education. Slovenia will also act in the second part of this year as a co-chair of the Bologna follow-up group, and we also intend to address the issue of possible synergies between the European higher education area and the European research area in the framework of the Bologna process. Let me conclude by just putting a list of main events and meetings that we plan to organize during Slovenian presidency. I will not go into much detail. Maybe most importantly is the ministerial conference titled currently Resetting Education and Training for the Digital Age. We will also link this conference with Digital Education Hack that the Commission is organizing yearly. Here, also recently established International Research Center under the auspices of UNESCO, Research Center on AI, will have a role and will most probably implement a specific challenge on AI as part of this event linked to what I mentioned in respect of the digital education hack. The idea is also to touch upon the use of artificial intelligence for and in education during our events. That would be all for now. Thank you very much for listening, and I'm happy to answer any questions or comments you might have. Thanks.
Thanks a lot. Really, also very systematic presentation, giving us all the necessary, I would say, main parts of the presidency regarding education. Maybe just one quick one. I mean, one quick question, really. Maybe stupid one. I mean, although they say they're not stupid questions, but still, I mean, do you plan anything to do in relating to education regarding the COVID situation? Any special, I would say, activities or
Yes, thank
whatever,
you. Yes, indeed. Well, we do. So there are, let's say, two strands of these activities. So one is actually continuous exchange of information that we have among member states on the situation at hand. We do this also based what current presidency has actually established based on a platform where then these results are then shared among member states. This is an activity which has actually been in different forms taking place since Croatian presidency and gives actually a very good understanding of the situation for member states and possible ways how to then set measures in a specific member state. So, but this is more related to this exchange of information among member states. Second strand, which we actually plan to address quite prominently during Slovenian presidency, is actually this proposal by the Commission for a Council recommendation on blended learning. Although it will touch upon primary and secondary education, I've mentioned it in the beginning of my presentation, it will address the consequences, the impacts of COVID crisis onto education and training, also with a view how to set the education processes, teaching and learning after COVID. So to take into account what has happened, what were the effects, and recommend member states. This is the idea of a council recommendation, to recommend member states these blended learning forms of teaching and learning. This can take place still in classrooms. It can take place also outside. It can take place digitally, with also different use of different tools. So tools that you have in classrooms, that you have online, and so on. So this is something which we will work on with member states. This will also be presented. This recommendation will also be presented most probably at the ministerial conference in November, and maybe even at some other events. Thanks.
Okay, thanks a lot. Yeah. Maybe anything else before we move on to all questions? I mean, to open up really the floor to everyone. Really, you can ask questions now also personally, or still write it down. There's another question for Sergey, but maybe because we discussed a little bit what to tell about education. I really ask you to really kind of focus on higher education. But Luca, maybe any important message to other education, so to say, other education schemes, basic, high school and so on. An important message, I mean, maybe.
From my side,
lower level, for the lower level of education, yeah.
Well, for lower level,
quick one, yeah, really.
The things I mentioned, blended learning as a new reality after COVID and in this post-COVID situation, and secondly, adult learning in this lifelong perspective. So with the role of universities as well, especially if we talk about this idea of micro-credentials. In Slovenia, for example, we already have some good examples of this programs of let's say, upskilling or reskilling the existing knowledge. So this is already something which is on offer, and this will also be part of this council resolution that we plan to put forward. The whole idea of the adult learning, in our view, is to really look at it holistically. It's a fragmented area, a sector, and putting in place a holistic view won't be easy, but we plan to do so. Also taking into account this initiatives like micro-credentials. There are also some others. For example, Commission is thinking of individual learning accounts, which you probably know. This can also be part of the story. So lifelong perspective, another message, let's say.
Okay, thanks a lot. All right, as said, the floor is open, but still you can ask questions during the chat, which is maybe more, pragmatical how to do it and easier to chair. And we have here now question, additional one for Sergey, actually. I mean, because you were mentioning obviously European level, national level, but here we have the question, what about the regional level? I mean, of course, many countries with a lot of regions, this is important issues for them for sure. Not maybe for smaller countries which maybe don't have regions or just few of them, but some countries have really a lot of regions. So maybe this is quite important.
Yeah, it's a very good question indeed. I think regional level is extremely important for larger, smaller, developed, rich, poor, whatever, for all countries. And in particularly for investments as well, because investments actually, they are local at the end. And for countries like Slovenia, which also invest a lot of structural funds on regional level, it's really important to have the regional level. So what we use as a name to describe this approach is the multi-level governance, and that's for us it's really important. But if you allow me, I will actually come to this. I also received one question in the private chat, but first I'd like to come back to this question on the non-binding nature, because I've meanwhile also read the opinion piece that Kurt very kindly posted here in the chat. Yeah. And if I may, Draško, sure. I think what we are facing here is, this criticism on the lack of ambition and the non-binding nature. I think it's really grounded. I actually agree with it, and personally, I'm actually very happy to read about it, because I consider myself one of those Arab believers, or I don't know how you want to call us, enthusiasts maybe, and I am equally frustrated and tired, actually. And even if in my degree, actually, which I did, I also came to a very similar conclusion. As I said, I'm a political scientist. So, but what I actually think is behind this criticism and this frustration, it's just that I think we are all as stakeholders, you and also we, who work in this area, we're just tired of waiting that these promises are delivered. That's all. And that's why I think it's not about, as I said, I really believe in the approach of form follows function. So the legal form, it's a form, and it needs to be used when no other tools work. That I can fully agree. But what I think is behind it, the question is, how will promises be delivered? And then the easiest answer is, let's have a law. Well, I mean, I've been working in this area for a very long time, and I remember Commissioner Geoghegan-Quinn coming to the council saying, we will have a legal act for ERA. And then the minister said, okay, on what will it contain? And she said, well, I don't know, but we will have it. Didn't work. Then the commission quickly had to abandon this idea. So it's not about the forum, really. And it's the same when you talk with the finance ministers for more money. It's not about, I need more money. Then the question is, what for? Even when my son asks me for money, I ask him what he wants it for. So it's really about the convincing, the function, or the content is crucial. So back to the question of a legal act. Well, yeah, maybe this is the only way, but I'm not sure the political situation. That's why I actually enjoy this criticism and the push from the stakeholders for more decisive action. because it helps us who are more convinced that we should have a stronger approach to convince those who are more conservative and more skeptics. And you know the map around Europe, you know which countries will never agree to anything like this, and which countries feel really, really sensitive about their autonomy in setting the targets and all. So it really helps. This debate of stakeholders really helps to push for more ambitions for those of us who believe we should be more ambitious. It doesn't matter what we believe as a presidency, because what our role is to find consensus. We can have a certain direction and drive, but we will just have to take the consensus. So it's really welcome that you are writing these inputs to us. Please write them also to our ministers at home, not only to the commissioner and to the parliament, because this is how at the end consensus is built. Now, on delivering on the ambitions, this is what I want to talk about. If you want, I can present what the current state of play is on the idea of how to deliver, the process to translate the objectives and the targets into national actions. I can describe this if you want, Draško, but I will take another minute of your time. So up to you.
No, we don't have any questions, at least here on the public part, which I can see. I have no private questions, so I think you should continue. And it's very interesting. And actually, you really got it correctly. You know, this discussion which was going on in some other meetings, you know, regarding ERA binding, non-binding, how strong do we go about it? You just nailed it now, really. This is the question which is really now on, I would say, about ERA.
Yeah, well, basically what I think the consensus, at least among the Commission and member states, is converging into is a couple of steps to translate these ambitions into action. The first milestone will be the Pact. And as I said, I need to stress this, the Pact will be so many times refined before it's final. We will have a first draft, then we'll have a second draft, then we will have a Commission proposal, then the Council will examine it and change it. So there will be, as I said, another stakeholder consultation in May, there will be the R&I days, there's the conference, really, there's a lot of this. So first milestone is the Pact. Second milestone will be to decide on what we call ERA policy agenda. You know, the main areas where we need action and achieve these EU and shared priorities. This should all happen still this year. So this would be our ambition as a presidency, is to endorse this ERA policy agenda, to say this is what we together work upon. Then the next step, now we come to this translation. The Commission will set up what they call ERA policy platform, where we as member states and regions and stakeholders, actually, this is an idea as well, still in the working, will be able to feed it with their current policies and actions, so that we have a good mapping of what is going on in reaching the shared ambitions in particular area. Then the next step will be for the member states to draft their national ERA action plans. And in those, they should set out, you know, the national investments, the reforms for implementing this policy agenda, these priorities, and also those which are not part of the priorities. So the whole spectrum of the European research area policy. And now comes the crucial part, because this we've had more or less. Now it was so different approaches, but now comes the crucial part. Then the Commission engages with the member states in bilateral dialogues and helps them really refine these national action plans, so that, you know, providing evidence and, capitalizing on the mapping, the ideas, the good solutions others had, so that really the action plans are more spot on. And then, then we have the horizontal ERA governance bodies and specific governance bodies, where we could coordinate, obviously, so that we have synchronized action on national, regional, and EU level. And finally, this is all monitored through to the policy platform that I mentioned and through the ERA scoreboard. But the crucial part is really this drafting of the national action plans, because this now has been an exercise some countries have really taken seriously. Some have just copy-pasted their existing strategies so that we had a document. But now this part is really being reinforced, because this was where we fell short for delivery. And in my private chat, I received a question on how stakeholders will be involved in this. Well, and now I'm not talking about the involvement anymore in the drafting of the pact, but in the future governance. Well, here I'm all ears also, because I would like to hear, good practices and good ideas about, but what we have mapped is a lot of possibilities. One, of course, is through these events like stakeholder conferences with policymakers, every year, every 2 years or whatever. Another one is that organizing more like a focused stakeholder forum on a specific topic. And this topic should be determined. There should be a process to determine a topic bottom up so that it's really relevant, but then only those stakeholders which are really working on the topic, this can be very specialized, are involved so that we can have really substantial interaction. Then what Kurt said, it's about opening ERA forum for transition. I agree. I think actually the governance bodies, and most notably it looks like, if you read the Commission communication, ERAC, European Research Area Committee, and the ERA Forum for Transition are going to be very most notable part of this governance. Well, I think they should hold public, not public, but open sessions with stakeholders, and public as well, at least once a year or twice a year, and depending on the topic. Then, of course, it's also about communication and consultation. Of course, we should also have an online stakeholder platform. This, I think, is being developed by the Commission. I'm not here to talk for them. And finally, one thing, because what I tried to set with recalling the number of stakeholders in Europe, well, of course, you cannot have a table of 3,000 people. But what you can have, and this has worked well in the open science area, you can have independent experts from academia or from other constituencies in these strategic governance bodies where they could objectively represent the respective interests of these communities. That's also one idea. But these are all what are our ideas that we can put on the table. It will depend on the consensus of all member states in the Commission, but I would really be eager to hear also others. So I've gone a little bit beyond, Draško, beyond the process, also to stakeholder involvement.
No, very good. I mean, as Kurt said, I mean, opening up ERA experts group, I mean, that's what you were saying actually as well, yeah. We have another question here, which is on public part. And but by the way, I mean, Sergey, I think it's very good that also your personal views on that are somehow mostly with the group that we are sharing here. I mean, and it's good that you are, now sharing this during the presidency, so you could also put your personal input there to achieve this as much as possible. Of course, within consensus and everything. Of course, we understand this procedure, but still, I think it's quite important that you have, I would say, a lot of stakeholders' views on these issues. We have here a question which is quite general one, and we talked a lot about it, and Commissioner talked a lot about it, that Europe is, of course, European Union is lagging behind some other countries. Within that also Slovenia a little bit, and what is planned to be done for improvement. The same situation is at Horizon Europe Financing and Development. Yeah, well, it's a general one, but I mean, the whole Horizon Europe is aimed at that we would catch up with some others, but yeah.
Sorry, higher education is meant. HE is higher education financing,
I thought
not
it's
Horizon.
Sorry. Okay, sorry.
Sorry, yeah.
But it's abbreviation
because
for
I know
Horizon
what
Europe
Peter wants to say. Sorry.
Okay. Sorry. Yeah, very good one. Okay, this is one for Luca there, yeah. That's a good one, yeah.
It's a very important point, and this is actually boils back down to the commitments and investments. Only that this is on a general level. So I think the 3% goal is really our guiding mantra for the research and innovation. And Luca, I think you have a 5% goal. You will say about this, but it's really important. Well, Professor Glavic, Slovenia is actually not doing so bad in Europe. We are investing somewhere beyond 2% at the moment, especially if the private side is good. But I fully share the message which is that we need to step up the game here. We, as our Slovenian stakeholders know, we are in the process of validating this commitment through a law. A law is being presented which will have legally binding, if you want, commitment to reach, and then also accompanied by the plan for increasing investments to reach these goals on the 3%. But it's really important to have this kind of a goal, which you know, like when you, it's sometimes also important to be too ambitious, because when you're shooting an arrow with a bow into a target that is far away, you always have to aim a little bit higher than the center of the target, regardless of how fast the arrow moves. Huh? So it's important to actually be too ambitious sometimes with the target, so that at least you reach the whole target and not maybe hit the bullseye at the end. But hopefully, I think this legal commitment to reach is really an important step, and I'm keeping my fingers crossed that at least for my country, this will be very soon adopted.
Yeah, we have to enlarge the financing of the narrow budget, so to say, for science, research, innovation. That's for sure, no doubt. We are lagging behind there. Private investment, quite okay, but also discussable owing to some tax, initiatives there and so on. But Luca, can you maybe add to this, please?
Yes, sure. Maybe briefly, in general, for the education, that actually Slovenia is above EU average of investments in education. This was also one of the targets of the former strategic framework, ET 2020. In my presentation, I referred to the strategic framework and the governance mechanism that we plan to put forward or agree on until the end of the year. This strategic framework can now also be called ET 2030. And in the former one of the targets was actually on investments, and there Slovenia, at least when it comes to education in general, as such, was above average. In relation to higher education, maybe I can add that those universities included in the European Universities Initiative can also be co-funded nationally from the development pillar of financing. I'm sure our universities involved know this very well. So this is, thanks.
I have another question privately about directionality. I mean, we mentioned before industry area. What about innovation area? This one is for you, Sergey, I guess.
Well, we need to be concrete here, because it's easy to say we need more investment into, I don't know, innovation, but we need to know what we are investing in. That actually brings me back to the targets. You know, there is one target of 1.25% of public effort. Public effort is not the same as public expenditures. So if we say we need to reach 1.25, it's not that we have increased the 1% public target from the current Barcelona target to 1.25. It's we have expanded it with tax incentives, actually, taking into account the tax incentives. And when you speak about tax incentives for innovation, well, what counts there, for example, is if a company procures a technology or just procures more innovative equipment. It's not an investment in the knowledge, it's an investment in the technology of the company. So obviously, there's not going to be any academia or RTOs involved in that investment in the innovation. So it's we need to exert some caution here when we speak about what is innovation. And then also it's the same with innovation infrastructures. We've got research infrastructures, and now we've got innovation infrastructures. So what are they? So when we speak about investing in innovation, we just need to be clear what we are speaking about. Research and also the level of measuring these investments is well, we don't really have good tools. We are measuring research and development expenditures through Eurostat very well. For the innovation, well, the methodology of measuring that is still to be agreed. So for me, when we speak about ERA and innovation area, my question is always, so what is missing for innovation in the European research and innovation area? when you speak about technology infrastructures, my question is, what are the research infrastructures failing to deliver on? Because they offer product validation, they offer prototype development already now. So we need to be concrete, and we come back to the directionality. We need to map, the priorities. For example, partnerships, to see where we are, what the challenges are, and then to see if there are services in the technology infrastructures which are not available yet, and we need to invest in those. So it's, again, I come back to the form follows functions, or in this case, content directs the investment.
Thank you, Sergey. Well, I don't have, and we don't have any questions. Maybe if, I don't know, maybe one of you or each of you has some private questions. I don't know. We have private and public